Well, I thought I'd revisit the world of Tarzan again, and this time I want to take a look at the movie Tarzan's Peril from 1951. Now, this one starred Lex Barker as the Lord of the Jungle, with Virginia Huston in the role of Jane. Now, the story here is that evil gun runners have come to the jungle, and it's up to Tarzan to stop them. But will he be strong enough to stand against an army of heavily armed villagers? Now, having watched and reviewed a number of the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films for this channel, it's always interesting to me to check out when other actors step into that familiar role to see how they compare. So let's watch this one and see how Lex Barker does here in the role of Tarzan. I'll give an overview of the film, spoiler-free, and then offer some closing thoughts and background from the film. So the film opens up and we see footage of natives who are dancing and drumming and singing. And this is real footage, with the drums and the ceremonial dancing, and it does add a degree of authenticity here. So they are dancing to honor Melmendi, who's played by Dorothy Dandridge. She is the queen of the Ashuba tribe. Now, while all of this is going on, we see a couple English guys there. We have Commissioner Peters. It's played by Alan Napier. Alfred from the old Batman show. And he was previously in the movie Tarzan's Magic Fountain. So he's there with his replacement, the character Connors, played by Edward Ashley. The story is that Peters is going to be retiring soon, so Connors is going to be taking his place. Now, some other natives arrive. They're bringing jewels and gems from King Bulam, but Melmendi is not interested at all and sends them away. Now, Peters observes this and says, "He means trouble now." So there's a little bit of foreshadowing there. Well, we hear some sinister music and see some trucks arriving. We see the character Trask driving his truck. He's played here by Douglas Fowley with a really awesome beard. And he's talking with the character Andrews, played by actor Glenn Anders. I think he sort of looks like a doughy Burgess Meredith. I don't know. And sleeping next to them is the sinister Radijek, played by actor George McCready. So Radijek has been pushing them hard to keep going deep into the jungle. Days of driving and then days of walking and so on. And these two look annoyed by it. Andrews just wants to stop and eat. Now suddenly, one of the trucks breaks down and they have to stop. Now, the film gives us a little bit of brief explanation that Radijek has escaped from lockup, and the natives have sounded the drums of his escape. And at about the 15-minute mark of the film, we finally see Tarzan. He's just chilling beside some water, having a drink. He's there with Cheetah, of course. When he hears the drums and he gets the message, Radijek has escaped, he says, and then he and Cheetah go to find Commissioner Peters. By the way, the character of Boy apparently is not in this one. I guess it's just Tarzan and Jane this time around. So Tarzan swings to go see his old friend Peters. Now, Peters is retiring after 30 years and tells Tarzan that Connors is taking over his role. You got to be careful anytime in a movie when you say, "It's been 30 years and I'm going to be retiring soon." That doesn't always end well, so be careful there, Peters. Well, in any case, Tarzan lets him know that he got the message that Radijek has escaped, and then he darts off into the jungle. He heads home, and he pops in and he sees Jane sleeping, and he goes into the kitchen, check on dinner, and using his amazing Tarzan powers, he's able to lift the lid from a Dutch oven without burning his hand. No hot glove or anything. Ouch. So anyhow, Jane comes in, and now she's played here by a different actress, Virginia Huston. I thought this was an interesting casting, as she looks a lot different than some of the earlier Janes, like Maureen O'Sullivan or Brenda Joyce, but more on that later. Tarzan talks to her and asks her deep questions like, "You love Tarzan? You happy?" I guess Tarzan's just being thoughtful today, but over dinner, Tarzan shares with Jane that the evil Radijek has escaped. Oh boy. Now, Cheetah has apparently stolen Peter's notebook, the silly thing, and Tarzan plans to return it to him the next day. Well, anyhow, a little bit later, Commissioner Peters, he goes and he meets with the character Trask. Now remember, he's one of the henchmen working with this Radijek character. Now, Trask has put all the guns away, wrapped him up, and he's pretending to be this innocent missionary. But Peters gets a little too curious and starts looking through some of the packages that they have, and he sees some guns. And it's too late. He gets gunned down by the evil Radicek. But I mean, come on, let's be honest. Peters did commit that gimmick earlier of doing yes, it's been 30 years and I'm going to retire soon. You can't say things like that in a movie. It's a surefire way to die. But anyhow, his character's killed, and Radicek is pretty cold-blooded about this. He just doesn't care. They take the guns and they move on. Now, Radicek doesn't seem to get along the best with these two guys, Andrews and Trask. And, but there's some muttering between the two of them. And these two guys resolve to stick together, but we'll see how well that goes. So meanwhile, Tarzan and Jane, they go for a boat ride. And Tarzan talks about the fresh fish for dinner that he would like. And I wanted to make a note, the music from the film is very nicely done. It colors the film nicely. It was done by Mikkel Michelet. I may have said that wrong, but just listen to it a little bit. It's really good. But anyhow, Tarzan goes swimming near some stock footage hippos, and then he does some silliness where he tugs on Jane's fishing line in order to make her fall into the water. Silly guy. Well, meanwhile, Radicek and his crew, they're moving along. And Radicek, being a sneaky jerk, causes a box to fall on Andrews as he and some of the natives are climbing up an embankment. So Andrews falls and breaks his leg, and, now he kind of looks like Shemp Howard. But anyhow, he's in bad shape, and Radicek says that he's going to be left behind with food, and that they will come back and return for him, of course. Now, Trask seems to debate if he should stay here with his poor friend, but then he decides to go along with the rest of the crew with Radicek, not wanting to be stranded out there. But wouldn't you know it, ants start biting at poor Andrews, so he crawls out into the water, he's kind of hanging on a log, but look out, there's some dangerous animals lurking nearby. Well, Cheetah is close by, and, she's up to some antics, eating eggs that may or may not be crocodile eggs, but when she spots Andrews in the water, she screams for Tarzan, and then he swims out to save him. And seeing that he's injured, they rush him to the local town of Randini, and they drop him off. And once he's taken care of, Tarzan moves out to investigate. Now, meanwhile, Radicek is on to his nefarious scheme. He has gone to meet with King Bulim, played by Frederick O'Neill, and offers to sell the king all these fancy guns. And the king responds agreeably and shows some gems and diamonds and things he has to him. Now, Tarzan, meanwhile, he's back and he's investigating, but he has to stop as a ridiculously cheesy-looking snake attacks Cheetah. And Tarzan nails it with a perfect throw. I mean, yeah, that looked a little silly, but anyhow, Tarzan finds a safari camp and he sneaks in, he apprehends the guards quietly, and then gets what he's looking for, the guns. Tarzan hates guns, so he scoops them up and gets rid of them. Now, Radicek and King Bulim and all of his troops arrive, and there's a big fight with Tarzan. And he's just outnumbered. Too many guys, they just pile on him. Now, Radicek wants to shoot him and kill him, but the natives, they won't allow it there, so instead, they toss him into the water and send him over a waterfall. Oh, no! Now, soon, all of King Bulim's men, they are armed. And Radicek has his prize, and he's ready to leave. And the king gives him some soldiers for protection, and they prepare to return. Now, Tarzan has apparently made it over the falls, and he's on the shore now. He appears to be near dead, but Cheetah is there to try to revive him. So, meanwhile, King Bulim's men, they're all heavily armed now. They charge in, and they take over Melmendi's village. They very easily take over all of it and make these people prisoners. Tarzan, meanwhile, slowly starts to recover. But soon he and Cheetah are almost eaten by a giant man-eating plant. Wow, Tarzan just can't get a break. He's finally able to break free, though, and he turns the thing into a giant salad, and then he rushes off to help these villagers. But will he be too late? And as Tarzan, as he's recovering, is he going to be strong enough to take on King Bulim and his heavily armed men? Well, can't give away the ending here, so you're going to have to see this exciting conclusion for yourself to see if Tarzan can survive Tarzan's Peril. So let me wrap this up with some closing thoughts. Tarzan's Peril came out in 1951, and it was the third Tarzan film that Lex Barker made for producer Saul Lesser with RKO. MGM at this point was finished with the Tarzan series, and RKO had picked it up, with Lex Barker taking on the Tarzan role previously played, obviously, by Johnny Weissmuller. And in researching the film, they shot a lot of this in Africa, in parts of Kenya, primarily in the Meru National Park, but also in parts of Uganda and Tanganyika. Now, apparently, and this was kind of funny to read about this, there was a miscalculation in the timing of the trip because warm months above the equator are cold below, and while filming, they had to deal with a persistent layer of fog, that would affect the lighting and the sunshine. And looking at the book Tarzan at the Movies that I was reading, I have it linked below. There's this quote: "The location site at the base of Mount Kenya was always so cloudy that Tarzan lost his tan, and an urgent call was sent to Hollywood for more body makeup. So he had to put on body makeup, I guess, for his Tarzan tan." Lex Barker said, "We just weren't prepared for location conditions. Local natives were rounded up, and the first time I appeared in the jungle in my loincloth, they burst out laughing. It was demoralizing." End of quote. So, also, apparently the original intention for this film was that it would be in color, but for some reason, half of it was ruined by accident, so they decided to go ahead with black and white instead. So, my thoughts are that the African footage did add a nice degree of authenticity. It's sort of that location footage that kind of adds to the film. And yes, it's still a Tarzan film with puppet snakes and stock footage and so on, but there was still enough footage from Africa to add nicely to the film. Also noteworthy was including plenty of footage of the natives. Notably the singing of the natives at the beginning of the film, playing the drums, and also the singing as they would travel. Anyhow, my general thoughts about the film was that this was an enjoyable Tarzan story, and I can't really complain about Lex Barker, as I think he did a fine job with the Tarzan role. Not just the physical aspects like the swinging on vines and swimming and throwing knives and so on, but, the Tarzan speech and the mannerisms, the way he interacts with Jane and the jungle characters and so on. I just think he makes for a convincing Lord of the Jungle. He carries the role well, and I think he's a worthy successor to Weissmuller's Tarzan. And, I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the Tarzan films he's been in. I've seen him previously in Tarzan and the Magic Fountain, and I think he does a good job. And I think they had a good story here as well. I mean, we all know Tarzan hates guns, and he's always gathering them and throwing them in rivers and so on. So having him face off against a diabolical gun runner, it's an old foe that he's encountered before, made for a good story. And his big battle with all of the natives at the end of the film and helping recruit the captive natives for a big final battle was pretty cool to watch, especially his final face-off with King Bulim and Ratachek. I think this is like the 12th Tarzan movie I've reviewed on the channel. And it's kind of interesting just thinking about it. Tarzan is sort of like, I guess, Sherlock Holmes or James Bond, where it's different actors kind of come along and play essentially the same character. And while there are similarities in appearance, build, behavior, language, and so on, each sort of plays the character in their own style. So Tarzan, in this case, very similar to like the Bond actors. So it's kind of neat to watch and see some of the subtle differences between the different Tarzans as I go through these. And in case you were wondering, Timothy Dalton will always be my favorite iteration of 007. But anyhow, I think this is the first film I've seen with actress Virginia Huston. And while she seems like a lovely and charming actress, I'm not so sure I'm sold on her as Jane. I mean, maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm just sold on like the Jane, like a Maureen O'Sullivan with the long dark hair. Virginia Huston just sort of reminds me of, I know this is going to sound weird, but Joan Allen, the actress playing Pat Nixon. I don't know, it just didn't quite work for me here. And I was puzzled, probably more than I should have been, wondering where she went to get her hair done. Okay, I know very little about hairstyling. I mean, for crying out loud, I go to Tony's barbershop every couple months for a basic haircut. So I spent a little more time overanalyzing Jane's hair here. And it appears to be fairly short and well treated with like the curls and things. So I showed a picture to my wife and I asked her about this. And she said that a hairstyle like that would require a degree of maintenance with curlers, probably a hair dryer, which I don't think would be things Tarzan would have in his hut. Now, maybe there was a hair salon in the town of Radini. I don't know. But boy, that was a weird rabbit trail to go down. But in any case, Virginia Huston followed her role in this film with roles in other films like Sudden Fear with Joan Crawford and Knock on Wood with Danny Kaye. Now, in 1952, she married a real estate agent, had a daughter, and essentially left Hollywood after having made only 13 films. King Bulum was played by African-American actor Frederick O'Neill. His character was possibly a little silly in the film, but I will say that I liked his final fight with Tarzan, when he showed that he meant business and he could hold his own against Tarzan. I enjoyed seeing that duel. Reading his background, it was interesting to learn that in addition to his acting, he helped organize Harlem's American Negro Theater in New York in 1940. And this helped launch the careers of actors like Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, and Harry Belafonte. I also wanted to make mention of actress Dorothy Dandridge, who played the character Melmendi. And, I kind of wish she was in this film just a little bit more, as I would have liked to see more of her backstory. Almost similar to the character Zandra, who was in Tarzan Triumphs. Maybe we could see a little bit more of her village and, her relationship with Tarzan and the villagers and whatnot. But, I guess that's just how the story was told here. And anyhow, the background, Dorothy Dandridge was an actress, a singer, and a dancer. And she was actually the first African-American film star to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in the movie Carmen Jones. So I might have to review that someday. And, I'm kind of curious if I should ever step into musicals. I think I've done quite a few reviews on the channel, but no musicals yet, unless you count Mad Monster Party. And one final note before I wrap up the review, I wanted to make mention of George McCready, who I thought did a very entertaining job as the super bad guy, Radicek. It's just all around rotten in this film. He turns even on his own men at one point, and he has no issues with selling weapons to natives, and even with using Jane as a hostage at one point. I've said it before, but to me, some of the greatest films are the ones with the most devious and sneaky villains that pair against the noble hero. And George McCready as Radicek was just perfect in this role. It's kind of funny. I know I talk about Mystery Science Theater 3000 a lot. It's like my favorite show ever. And I caught him recently in a very silly film that they watched called The Human Duplicators. And he played, you guessed it, another polished, smooth-talking villain. I think he may have been an android too. But that's a fun one to watch if you can find it. In any case, that's my review of Tarzan's Peril from 1951. Really like this one, and it was a fun entry into the Lex Barker Tarzan series. Thought it had a great story, plenty of action, some colorful scheming bad guys, and the African footage and music was a very nice touch as well. This was a great Tarzan film. It's one worth checking out.